Hello, and thank you for welcoming me on the podcast today. So, I want to jump in and say my name is Zoe Howard. I am a current master's student through Grand Canyon University in the Educational Leadership program. I am a recent graduate with my bachelor's in education, and I'm really interested in talking about this today. So, our topic today is constitutional rights provided to students on a diverse amount of campuses, whether that be public, private, or online campuses. So, in general, there are a lot of constitutional amendments that are provided to the students and their rights. Obviously, we have the First Amendment rights of free speech, Fourth Amendment rights of search and seizure, Fifth Amendment rights of self incrimination, Eighth Amendment right of cruel and unusual punishment, and the 14th Amendment due process. So, in most cases, the First Amendment right is absolutely awarded to students through Tinker v. Des Moines Independent Community School District. That federal court case stated that students do not shed their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate, so students are able to keep their First Amendment rights although they are still in the school building, so there are different rules that go along with it. For the Fourth Amendment right of search and seizure, schools and school officials are only able to search through students' bags if there is a reasonable cause or a probable suspicion, which can get pretty gray at times, but it's really never needed unless there is valid suspicion or reason to go through a student's belongings. The Fifth Amendment right of self-incrimination. This allows students to plead the Fifth if they are being questioned by an officer or a school official while in the school building. They're able to plead their Fifth Amendment rights and wait for a parent, guardian, or a lawyer before answering any questions, as students need to be rid their rights to remain silent. The Eighth Amendment of cruel and unusual punishment. In the 1970s, all kinds of corporal punishment were outlawed, although 12 states do still allow hitting students as part of their punishment, which is kind of crazy. But, hopefully it'll get better as time goes on. And then the 14th Amendment of due process. Every student in a public school system is able to get due process rights. If something were to come up, they are able to challenge whatever the school says, and they are able to obtain information on exactly what happened, why they are being disciplined, and how they can go about hearing their case. Edweek.org provided a lot of really great information on the different constitutional amendments and how they relate to students, so you should definitely go check those out. Looking at public schools, private schools, and online school spaces. Public schools, obviously, we follow Tinker v. Des Moines for the First Amendment rights of free speech. As I stated earlier, students do not shed their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate, so public school students still obtain all of those free speech rights. That came about due to a couple students wearing black wristbands in protest of the deaths of the Vietnam War. That was challenged back in 1969, and they decided that that was a version of their free speech. They were not disrupting the school day, so it was not a violation of the free speech laws. Looking at Moores v. Frederick in 2007, school officials can prohibit certain things for free speech, such as items of clothing that have phrases on them, or something that promotes illegal drug use or illegal activities. That is a different way that they can limit free speech of the First Amendment. Looking at private schools, a quote from Ernst Legal Group stated that private schools are bound by the terms of contracts entered into with their students and staff, which often include provisions that mimic the spirit of due process rights found in public institutions. Private schools do not need to follow due process laws or First Amendment laws, as they are not a public institution governed by the government. But in the contracts that they have with the staff and students, they do typically mimic the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment of due process rights. So students are still entitled to due process as deemed by the private school. As stated by the Seattle University of Law, Brett McIntyre went in really great detail about private schools and public schools. He stated that there needed to be more than just the discomfort and unpleasantness of an ordinary controversial viewpoint in order for a school to step in and regulate student speech. So this is talking about like the First Amendment rights of free speech and how schools need something really, really important or special to be able to go and interfere with that. And he also stated that schools must show that a student's speech materially and substantially interferes with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school. Protecting a student's rights to receive an education without disruption applies to Tinker v. Des Moines, and unless a student is severely impacting someone else's education with what they're wearing or saying, then the school does not have a right to go and change that. Something I wanted to talk about is student free speech within social media, whether that be on campus or off campus. So I'm going to focus on, can schools discipline a child or a student for what is said on social media off campus when it relates to something on campus? So I have two arguments here. So an argument for school interference. Medium.com, this website has a lot of information on legalities for schools and students alike. They state that the legal framework suggests when off-campus conduct demonstrably and significantly interferes with the educational environment, schools may have the authority to intervene. So this is really stating that if whatever the student is done off campus on their social media severely interferes with the educational environment or the rights of another student, then the school does have rights to intervene and have them take it down or take whatever process they have to do in order to amend the situation. To go against school interference, EFF.org had a really in-depth conversation about how schools do not have the right to discipline or interfere with students' free speech on social media outside of the school day. A quote that I took from the EFF website was that EFF also explained that protecting students' off-campus speech, including on social media, is critical given the central role that the internet and social media play in young people's lives today. Not only do students use social media to vent their daily frustrations, as the student in this case did. This is talking about a student in a cheerleading squad that did not get onto varsity, who vented her frustrations on her Snapchat story using the terms "fuck cheer," which the school tried to intervene with, and her family sued the school and they won. Continuing the quote, but students also use social media to engage in politics and advocacy, from promoting candidates during the 2020 election to advocating for action on climate change and gun violence. Expanding schools' ability to punish students would chill students from engaging online with issues they care about, an outcome that is anti-ethical to the values underlying the First Amendment. Looking at both of these, in my professional opinion, I do not believe that a school has the right to interfere with students' speech outside of the school day unless there is a threat to another student or staff member or a threat against the school itself. That can be taken up by the other student, the other person, the staff member in a legal sense, but not through the school, as it truly has nothing to do within the school environment. I want to say thank you again for having me on today, and I hope that this was very informative to you. Once again, I want to ask you to go back and look at edweek.org. Firstamendment.mtsu.edu included all of those different court cases that I mentioned earlier that discussed the amendment rights for each of the students. And then Ernst Legal Group and the Seattle University School of Law, they also included a lot of really good information. So if you'd like to look further into this, please go ahead and take a look.